And I see the feminine and the masculine energy the same way. Both of them are in us, both of them are necessary, but we do have, in different times, we're utilizing one more than the other. So we're resourcing more one type of energy.
Hi, this is Monica, The Conscious Shift. Welcome to another episode of Tools. Today I'm speaking with Andrea Arare, a Brazilian shaman living and working in London. Andrea was initiated in Brazil, but first she went into her corporate career. She had a degree in engineering and she was working as a program manager, but eventually she shifted into what was originally her calling. She is running women's circles and helping women reconnect with the feminine energies using shamanic tools. In this conversation, we talk a bit about what shamanism is, what are the different energies, masculine and feminine, and how they manifest in our lives. And she will talk about how she helps these women reconnect with their feminine. Thank you very much for watching. Please share it with anyone who might also benefit from this conversation. Hello, Andrea.
Hello.
Very nice to see you.
It's wonderful to see you, and I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. Very important topic.
Me too. It is a topic that I feel like a lot of people heard the buzzwords. They heard about women's work, they heard about the feminine, they heard about shamanism, but they don't really understand, what it works and how it fits together. Exactly. So I'm very excited to go a little bit more deeply with you on that as well. And maybe before we jump in, I'd love for you to share a little bit about your story, actually, how you started with that work, how actually we've got two sort of strains here, the shamanism and obviously women's work.
True, which my intention is at the end, combine them so people can understand why I'm connecting and working with both. Yeah. So you have already done an excellent job in explaining that my background is engineering, that I come from a very technical, very masculine background, which was visible when I was in engineering school, because out of 30, 40 people in a classroom, you have 4 women maximum. So that I would say it's part of what my story had to be, to heal my connection with my family. My father is an engineer, my grandfather was an engineer, and there was part of me that wanted to prove that I could succeed in this world the way it looks like and still do okay. So yes. I did fantastic. I wore the hat and I did a fantastic job. My last job was as operations manager for an energy conservation company. So this is where kind of I stopped to do the big leap of moving fully into healing. But the truth is that I always had a background in a desire to understand beyond what this physical life was. So yes. I was only 14 years old when, born in Brazil, very Catholic country, I asked my mother, so why am I Catholic? What does that mean? And I went into the church for a whole year, training, understanding, or being taught, being given the explanations that the Catholic Church gives, and to then complete that at 15 and say, oh, okay, I'm not Catholic, now I have to figure out what I am, because I need answers, and the ones that I have are just not fulfilling. And I've been in a long zigzag journey in different places. So I started working as an energy worker. As a teenager, I was less than 20 years old. And it was also the time that I happened to meet a shaman. It wasn't they say that when you're ready, the teacher shows up to you, for you. And it wasn't a conscious desire, but it was something that really made sense for me. So another stronger component for me was that I have always been very connected to nature. And I always wanted to protect nature or to understand. For me, it was inseparable of what the life I was living, even though I was being raised in Rio de Janeiro. It was a big city. So that the nature component was completely fulfilled when I discovered a spiritual path, that the shamanic path, that uses nature components to draw wisdom from, to respect and have a reverence, and all of that was very nurturing and fulfilling to me. So I went through my preparation, my apprenticeship, and the initiation, and it really felt a very eloquent path for me, even though I was already started to my journey as an engineer in engineering school. That one really translated to me the gut feeling that I had, that nature had an innate wisdom in it. So I did follow the shamanic path for a while, and then it kicked in the grown-up desire to fulfill my parents' wishes and make sure that I could prove myself. So when I finished college, I was, and during college also, I was working full time and I was doing engineering school. So it was a very material world that took me away, mostly from my spiritual path. And there you go, I graduated, I got the job, and actually shortly after I moved to United States, where I stayed for 15 years. So the spiritual path never went away. I moved to Israel, I lived there for a while, I really immersed myself in the culture, and behind was always a desire to find the truth. I wanted to understand what was that thing that kept calling me and wanting me to find that truth. And now that I'm 46 years old, what I can say is that I found truth everywhere. I found truth in all those paths, and none of them were the truth, because all of them were represented, either created or represented by a human that had their own issues and backgrounds. So I still honored and still honor very much the traditions that I was trained in, the knowledge that I received. But I realized that there was something beyond the boundaries that were given to me that I needed to connect with. So shamanism was already very strong as the base in me, even though those times I wasn't connected, and I knew where my teacher was. We had some exchange, but I wasn't strong practicing. So about 10 years ago, I got the calling. And the calling, I tell people, it's not like a Hollywood movies. Doesn't look like magic. It looks like that desire inside of you that I need to change something. And if you don't listen to the calling, sometimes the calling goes away, but it doesn't, that thing that is started, that seed that started sprouting inside of you, doesn't just disappear. The energy gets trapped right there. And then we have to later work with this deeply in a different way. But
and Andrea, did anything happen? Was there anything that sort of, in your life situation at the time that made you stop and listen to this? Or how did that feel?
Great question. Thank you. I always heard the calling that has been the blessing in my life, even though I spent many years being trained in the left side of the brain and very, very problem solving oriented. And whenever I had the calling, I always heard. So the biggest, yes, there was a big shift in my life, which I was coming out of a relationship that was with a lovely person, but the relationship was terrible, triggered so many things in me. It was a mirroring of other relationships with parents that weren't healed. And I did a lot of work to heal myself from that. A lot of therapy, a lot of healing, and a lot of inner growth, where I was quite involved in a Buddhist temple. So I was doing everything that I could to not just get out of that relationship, but I understand all that attracted me to that. So I came out of that relationship and I was feeling quite strong and also quite strong on myself, and told myself, okay, so now I'm going to take that time to clear whatever. Although I was doing so much work on myself for many months, I said, I'm going to take my time here. I didn't. I met my husband 2 months later. I knew right away that he was the one. I called my home in Brazil and I said, this is the guy. And being that nurturing, safe relationship that I had, I was quite strong when I told him the things that were okay and were not okay for me. And kind of for the first time, I put very strong boundaries for the very beginning. So I created a space that was so safe and so nurturing to me that as soon as the calling came, I said, yes, I'm right here, I'm going. And this is pretty much what gave me so much space to go. And in this going, I found the New York Shamanic Circle, which is a 20-year-old organization that volunteers in creating ceremonies, shamanic ceremonies for the New York City community, just for people to experiment, to have a sense of what it was. And as soon as I joined them, it hadn't been 2 months, they, as a core member, as somebody who was helping and volunteering and creating things, they turned to me and said, so we heard a message, we received a transmission that you're going to be running the women's circle from now on. And I'm like, I'm an operations manager. That's not what I do. But the truth is, I had been in circles, in women's circles, many, many times in my life for all those years that I didn't know that I was preparing myself to be able to be somebody who leads, to guide. It was never my intention. My plan when I joined that engineering school is that I'm going to be an engineer and I'm going to represent my family in the lineage that was here left for me. So I didn't realize that was it. So the moment that I hosted my first women's circle, I came home and I knew I was born to do that. Everything that happened have happened in my life until that moment prepared me for that specific skill, for to be a ceremony holder. Never in my life I would have guessed that.
I just want to pause here, Andrea, because this is, that moment when, first of all, you do all the work of, following your desires, following our needs. I mean, the fact that, you went and did your engineering degree to honor, your family's lineage, that was a need that needed to be fulfilled, right? And there's nothing wrong with those choices, because people sometimes regret certain things that they did. And I just want to just pause here and point to this fact that those choices, we make them because we need something out of that. And yet, listening to that calling and listening to yourself, and then that feeling that you get when you know you're doing the right thing, it's irreplaceable. And this is something that you just shared, you know, that you just knew.
I appreciate you saying that, because everything that how I was trained, I'm not going to say every information that I received in engineering school, but actually how I was trained there, it was exactly what I needed to be an energy healer right now. Electronic engineering, electrical engineering, and being an energy healer, actually, a lot of the things that I had to learn from a abstract concept, it makes so much sense to me nowadays to be able to manipulate energy in a way that I know how energy works. I know how electricity works. It all makes sense to me. So I agree with you, and I appreciate you taking that pause, because I I I feel that everything that I've done to that moment, in a deep, insightful moment, it was valid. Everything was necessary in order to prepare me to be that person in that moment. Even having neglected so much of my feminine side in this journey, because it gave me the blueprint to heal all of that. So nowadays I can be supporting women to heal their version. Because when my clients who are lawyers, who are CEOs, who are in corporations, who are completely detached from that feminine side, when they come to me, I say, I know where you're coming from. I know exactly how you're feeling right now.
Yes, and I mean, you're talking about obviously that moment when, you know, the journey started to make sense, right? Because sometimes you're just you're going, you're not quite sure where you're going and why, but you're going. And you know what you're describing here is that moment when, you know, it was like, oh, I see how it all fits together now. And so you mentioned, you know, you were in a very masculine environment, and that you had to heal your own feminine energy. Could you actually talk a little bit about, you know, what is the feminine, what is the masculine? You know, how did that manifest for you?
Of course, yeah. So this is the part that I think hopefully I can support the people listening here to understand why the connection was so important for me between the shamanic practices and the feminine. Because in that moment when I was holding ceremony in a women's circle, I realized that there was so much more beyond what I learned as a shamanic practitioner and as a ceremony space holder, that I didn't have the full range to access. So then I went into a deeper journey at that point, which was to retrain myself from a school that supported women to reconnect or ignite, or I don't like the word that to find, because we have never lost, it has always been inside of us. But the idea is that when you go to a mystic school, is the tools that we have forgotten and haven't been given to us in order for us to connect with the feminine. So my full journey kind of made sense right there, when I agree with you. I had no idea in any other point before that 37th year of life. I was almost in my 40s, that this is where I was going. But in that moment of understanding, everything just fit and made sense. So I'll start with what the feminine looks like, and then I can explain why this journey connected.
Mm-hmm.
So the feminine and the masculine are both energies we have in ourselves. They're both important. In no moment in women's circles that I host, I say men are bad and women are good. This is not it. And actually, the masculine energy, a lot of the masculine energy that I learned as an example from the beginning came from my mother. It came from my aunts. It came from the women in my family, which they're very strong, actually. And the masculine energy is that energy that is very focused, is goal-oriented, is usually when Chinese medicine will talk about the yin and yang, will give characters to them. So one is wet, the other one is dry, one is warm, the other one is cold. And I see the feminine and the masculine energy the same way. Both of them are in us, both of them are necessary, but we do have in different times, we're utilizing one more than the other. So we're resourcing more one type of energy. The moment that I wake up in the morning, I look at my clock and I see that I have to get to work. I have to resource from masculine energy to get myself ready, to eat the breakfast, to get out of the door so I can get to work on time. And the feminine energy is that one that I can resource on the weekend when I don't need to get out of bed right now, and I can just relax a little more. If I don't have that timeline that I need to go. So the feminine energy is the one that I use when I open the closet and I say, what do I feel like wearing today? What color makes me feel that I'm expressing myself the best? So there are many ways that we can explain those different energies, but both of them are necessary to be present, with the caveat that because we were born in feminine bodies, we should be resourcing out of the feminine energy slightly more than the masculine, because it's the energy that we chose. If I'm choosing to be a heterosexual woman, is the energy that I chose to be my primary energy. So, but I still use both. And I think every time that I'm capable of flipping from the spreadsheet and getting the lunchbox to my son as he's leaving the door, all of that is very necessary, and I think it's fantastic. And the moment that he leaves and I say, what kind of tea do I feel like drinking right now? And do I feel like meditation or do I feel like a stretch? So one thing that was really important for me is that I was in very disciplined mode most of my life, not just for work and for especially working in a very male-oriented world, but also in my life in general. My spiritual practices, they were very structured and they had a lot of discipline, and that it felt safe. It felt like it contained my wildness, until I didn't want that. I want the wildness to say, I don't feel like sitting down for meditation in this morning, and actually showing up for what I need in that moment. Is the feminine practice, is that harnessing the energy that is inside of me and knows better than the structure that I bring from the outside.
Actually, as you're speaking about this, Andrea, I remember one of my shamanic journeys where the shaman I worked with said that sounded like my masculine, needs a little healing. And as you're speaking now, I'm thinking, yes, I could do with a lot more discipline. I think I've been using my feminine energy quite a lot. So I think I'll get onto that.
I feel like this is the new era. This is the new dimension of living, is the balance between these two energies. Because to be honest, if I was in the jungle, that would be so more flexible for me to just go with the flow. But I live in a big city. I live in London, and I need to pay bills, and I need to make sure that my son is still accepted in the school system. And there are a lot of rules that right now I agree to follow. And right now in this moment, I agree that I want to be part of. And there are some that I don't. And so I don't care. I'm perfectly comfortable showing up for a school with my hair wild, with I don't have to wear makeup every time. And this is about how I'm negotiating with my masculine and my feminine side all the time, because it would be fantastic if I had a flip switch that says right now just masculine, but that's not the reality. And as you probably heard from shamans before, the work of a shaman is to be the channel between the divine and the physical, the upper and the lower, the mundane here. So I never met a shaman who was only in connected there, only up in the clouds. They all have trades. They all create something, sell something, do something, because it's this connection between the practical and the spiritual. And for me, that was the answer for everything. I could never see myself. I'm Taurus. I'm very grounded. My superpower, one of my superpowers is bring a room with 30 people, and ground everybody. So I couldn't be the person who's always in the clouds. And I could never deny that I have this deep connection since I was a child, that I knew that was something above. So naturally for me, shamanism just was the perfect translation.
Yes. And Andrea, you mentioned that you had to heal your own feminine energy first, or that connection. Could you talk about a little bit about how it manifested when it wasn't healed? And, you know, how did the process of healing, what did it look like?
Oh. Excellent questions. So I was very proud of being a workaholic. And at that time, I actually fulfilled a deep purpose of taking me out of a place that I didn't want to be. So for example, when I was in a relationship that didn't fulfill me, instead of, and I was doing some work, but I was doing the work within the context of, I don't have the full permission of being out, releasing things. So for example, one thing that the feminine is really good about is holding, because that's just looking at our feminine reproductive system. It's the function. We hold the masculine reproductive organ, we hold babies. So we're holders, but also we know when to release, to open. And the imbalance of the feminine is hold, grab, and never let go. So releasing that relationship was really hard for me, but also releasing any part of myself that would be just relaxing. So I was so proud of being an workaholic. I was so proud of being the person who set rules. I was a manager. I was the boss. I had to guide people. But my guidance was very from a strong, fixed place, instead of let's sense everybody here. Where is this going? And one thing that I would say from the feminine that really helped me as my process of healing was to start observing who is good in what, and then putting that people to play their roles that they were best at. But that's a feminine quality, because it requires you to be oriented to what do you do best in here in this situation, and it seems that you're best in that one right there. So the blueprint to healing the feminine, I wish I had the red pill from Matrix and give to everybody. Just distribute that everywhere. And the moment you take that, that's it, you're healed. But the journey is actually really important. Getting to that place of becoming healed, it teaches you a lot about ourselves. Yes. And this is the thing that I miss the most, in my journey of becoming a grown-up with the strong masculine-oriented energy, it was a lot about being the person my family, my culture, my society, co-workers and whatever wanted me, expected me to be, and less myself. So I actually heard from high school friends at some point, it's like, yeah, Andrea, of course you became a healer. We kind of knew that was coming. I'm like, what do you mean? I didn't. You have always been different. We knew that. And in a way, for me, it was a surprise because I just didn't have enough tools to know myself. Because that place of stopping, slowing down, which is a very feminine thing. So you can observe the surroundings, so you can reorient yourself. I actually, as I'm training myself in somatic experiencing, I have a very strong association with the parasympathetic system with the feminine, because it's that one that relaxes and allow you to be very inwards oriented and understanding yourself, to the parasympathetic system, which is fantastic. We needed that when we needed to. My son is coming close to the street. I don't need anything else. I don't need to be distracted. I need to get there where he is and stop him from crossing the street. But I lived in the parasympathetic, in the sympathetic system. I lived in the stress, high active zone, go, 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 do, do, do. And a lot of my values were oriented towards my achievements. And one of the main things that I was lucky to heal is to start finding value on my presence. Mm-hmm. So for me, there wasn't a magic solution, but it was a lot of healing of who I was and the values that I was bringing in being myself. So in that, I did have to retrain myself in feminine shamanism, because the traditional North American shamanism that I received, the traditions, the teachings, it was very masculine for me. It didn't nurture that part that I was, that I can nowadays expand my healing sessions, for example, and do I can do a full reading in chakras, because that one didn't allow me to just experience what gifts, other gifts I was bringing, but actually it trained me really well, which I appreciate and still honor and still use it the same way, but it trained me really well in using energy in specific ways that didn't expand more. So I would say even having this flexibility, because the feminine is about the flow, is about the water that just adjusts. Well, there's a rock here, so I move around the rock, and today is raining, so let's come up with a different plan for what kind of activities we're going to do. And it's sensing that moment that for me was necessary. For me, it was a moment of reclaiming that there was a wisdom already existent inside of me. And you probably know this, that from shamanic trainings is about kind of stripping you down from everything that you have, is like the super challenging trials you have to go through, and all of them teach you a lot. But nowadays I trust my intuition more than anything else. And so when I am doing a healing for somebody, I will bring the components of shamanic healing that I have learned, but I'm very present to any transmissions, any guidance that I receive in that moment. I'm like, no, actually this person needs to be hugged in this moment. And those things would not be allowed if I was only using that traditional path that I received. Yeah. So I would say, although there is no one formula for everybody, I would say the most important thing for anyone trying to connect and heal that feminine side is to give credit to the body. So this dissociation, strong dissociation that we have in modern cultures of the head is the principal, the head is the main, the head is the lead. I very much value everything that I knew, that I went to engineering school and I trained myself, that I was initiated as a shamanic practitioner, all of that, to then come to a point and say, I was never trained in how to, I was trained in as a light worker to work with chakras, but not to the level that I do nowadays. That was pure transmission. That was directly coming from the divine, that I received information on how to do this. So the body is a very strong component of this connection with the feminine. So it's about embodiment. And shamanic practice have this a lot. You don't learn about fire. Yes, you learn some information about that, but you become fire. You have to commune with fire in order to activate the fire inside of you, in order to receive the information that fire has to transmit to you. You have to sit in front of fire hours and hours, ceremony after ceremony, in order to know what fire is. And the feminine has this journey of, you don't learn about the feminine and there you go, you're now initiated. You connect with the body. You learn about the body's way of communicating. You sit with the body. You apologize to the body. I run this dry. When we used to work 16 hours a day, sleep 6 hours, 4 hours a night, I misused my body and the energy of my body. So it's to take the time to hear the body complaining and saying, you sucked from that time to that time. You weren't nice to me. Nowadays, I value a lot more. So grateful for everything that therapy did for me. But I value, for my own maintenance and practice, I value a lot more my weekly sessions of acupuncture, chiropractor, massage, and everything that supports the body, so the body can continue sharing all its wisdoms with me. And also the moments that I need with nothing else. There's no meditation, there's no practice, there's nothing. It might be just a cup of tea. It might be yoga nidra. It might be just resting and relaxing. This for me was revolutionary, to allow myself to be proud of doing nothing. And this is a whole new dimension that I never experienced before.
And actually, this is something I noticed, for instance, a lot of Americans, North Americans, are so burnt out because the culture over there, I mean, it's even worse than here in London. We think we're working hard in London, which we are. It's, it's a big city, it's an expensive city, and we're all running. However, I noticed that Americans particularly, I mean, obviously not to mention Japan and so on, but I had direct contact with a lot of American friends when I was in Mexico, and it was incredible to see how we, run down our bodies just because we are running after those goals that are defined by the societal structure we live in, and we forget to question it. We think those goals are good for all of us, but actually, they're just guidelines, and we forget to use them and see them as such. And so our bodies become this, almost like this weight, in the end, until it breaks down. And that's when people start paying attention, until an illness comes, we know the story. Now, so it's very interesting that you sort of notice that, obviously that connection, and you're now maintaining and giving to that body, which is a beautiful practice, because I think, you know, obviously there's so much wisdom in the body that we hold, and the connection with it is another, I guess, practice that we all should be maintaining. I'm curious to hear, you know, when you started to work with women and create this container for women to do the work, could you explain what women's work is? You know, what do these women do in these women's circles? And, you know, what is the benefit that in the end they get? And then after that, I'm really curious to hear how you're combining, you know, shamanism as well with that.
Beautiful questions, and very true statement about the American culture. As I lived there for 15 years, and nowadays I carry an American passport. I can say that's the main blessing and drive for me to completely to quit my job and happen to fall into becoming a full-time healer, was because it's so ingrained in the culture, because it's coming from the political structure that they have. So women have no maternity leave on a federal level that is paid. And at the time that I got pregnant, that's when I quit my job. I did not want to leave my 2-3 month old child in childcare. And what I observed, and I have a lot of women from United States in my community, is that they start learning this culturally. My mother did that, my aunts did that, my friends did that. So it should be okay. I should be okay in doing that, until they are not, until they're showing signs of high levels of depression. It's the rates of depression and postpartum issues, complications are becoming really big, because the woman might be suffocating a desire, a need that she has of bonding and connecting with that child that is not given to her. So that's actually was the big push for me. Everything kind of aligned, and as I became pregnant, I'm like, see, I'm not going to, I'm privileged enough that I could make that choice. And I know that so many women do not have that option. So what happens in a women's circle, it's kind of the golden question that I can never explain. I would say is the space that I see a lot of women finally releasing the shields and opening up. So it's not therapy, but it's a place that, because you're in a very safe container, I share the rules at the very beginning so women can understand what they're joining, what they're coming into. And those rules are mostly so they can know that they're fully protected in that space. And what they realize is that they are not alone, that there's so many women around the world going through somewhat similar challenges, or even if they're not similar, that they are not the only ones going through what we're calling this feminine crisis, because we live in an over masculinized world. We live in a world that it is giving prize to the one who is a workaholic, and it's putting down the one who said, I actually didn't do anything this weekend. I just rested. I didn't drink, actually. I didn't want to do that. So this difference in culture is where I'm welcoming women who are kind of lost in the path. They know that one doesn't fit to them, and they don't know where to get somewhere else or what the other place is. For me, is also a great opportunity to show up as a role model for some women who are asking themselves, but I don't associate with the woman who is always wearing a red dress and she's in lipsticks and I'm telling them, this is not the feminine a woman embodying the feminine. That's a lovely way to look if it feels right for you. But embodying the feminine is something that is in you. It's unique to you. And unless we have this space, you won't be able to access that. That communication is not happening. So it's a place that women are just taking a pause and listening to that inner voice. So women's circles have no specific structure. It's a very ancient tradition that you can find in many cultures around the world. The same way as it is shamanism. Shamanism is considered to be the oldest form of spirituality of humankind. And shamanism has a very strong component of the circle. So the ceremonies are usually held in a circle, because the idea is that in that circle, nobody is above anyone else. Everybody is there seeing everyone. Everyone is in the same level. So the thing that I love the most about the women's circles is that I have a 20-year-old sitting across a 7-year-old, and they're connecting about similarities, about points that they have in common. We're missing that. We're missing that transmission of wisdom, of knowledge that we used to do. And what I see is when the women are coming into the ceremonies, what they find is that there's something familiar for them that they don't know how to map, but they know that being there, it feels very, very instinctive, right? And I do believe that this has been printed in our DNA, that this has been written in us for all the years and the generations that we sat around the fire to raise our children, to prepare food, to make medicine. We have always said there to teach, to learn, to share. And there's nothing to solve. Nobody's there to give advice, to tell how to fix somebody's life. We're there to witness, to hold the space. And you know what happens? Our own inner wisdom comes out and says, I actually know what to do. I have the most incredible stories of women coming back 6 months later. I've been hosting Women's Circle for almost 10 years. But just here in London, I've been doing for 2 years, more than 2 years. And I have women who come back 6 months later and said, everything changed in my life since I came to this Women's Circle. And nobody was there telling them what to do. They went home, they integrated that, they processed that, and they knew what to do after. They just had the courage and they took the next step. So because women's circles have no specific formula, I bring to my women's circle the flavor of what the path that I follow. So I bring shamanic journeys, and shamanic journeys are done drumming, rattling, and they have a specific goal of setting an intention, like a super boosted, for people who have never done, a super boosted meditation experience where you go beyond any kind of experience of imagining things. So the women's circle has this free flow with a very safe container of everybody who is there is putting out there as much and or as little as it feels right for them. But I know and I hear in every single one of them that there is some kind of deep awakening, a transformation of being exposed to something that they had never had a chance to be before.
And actually, from what you're saying, I think it's also very inspirational, to hear other women, speak honestly in this safe container, where you can learn from each other. So not through advice and solutions, as you said, but by resonating with certain things that other people talk about through their own experiences and conclusions, this is how healing can happen, where you go around the ego. Because I think, you know, my own conclusion is that you can only heal once you are able to like quiet down the ego, because that's when, you know, you can allow for some change. You can allow, you know, for that to face the fear that we all carry of seeing ourselves not perfect, seeing ourselves as people, you know, who carry shame or guilt or, you know, any of those emotions. And you know, any sort of wounds that will reemerge, obviously they feel very threatening. And so witnessing another person, you know, possibly maybe going through something and experiencing something is also very powerful for us as a healing tool.
Yeah, and being heard, which is a different way of relating to others. I usually joke that let's learn a different way of talking to each other that we learn in pubs. Nobody's trying to yell louder to have been their voice disturbed by all the noise and everything else. It's everybody's quiet, is silence, is paying attention to one woman, and that woman sees herself being witnessed. It's life transformative.
It is. Those are very simple things if you think about it, but I have experienced a few of those circles, and I understand what you say. And could you tell us how you integrate then that shamanic work? You know, how does that help? How does it look like? So you talked about drumming and rattles, you know, but how does that help in this healing, you know, work?
Excellent question. So my previous experience was holding ceremonies, and that was mixed for men and women. And when I realized that as we connect in a women's circle, we connect in that sacred space, we're feeling our parasympathetic system is kicked in, oxytocin is just washing us, is making us soft, and it's making us more open to that inner voice that usually we don't have opportunity to hear. Then I boost all of that with the shamanic journey. So I invite the women to come in that journey with the drum that science has researched and shows that different shamanic traditions around the world, without connection, because there was no telephone or internet or anything, they all discover some things in common, and one of them is rhythm. So it happens that that specific rhythm of drumming or rattling for a shamanic journey, it changes the brain waves, the frequency, and allows you to reach higher states of consciousness. So those are done with full, complete control. It's different than it's done with plant medicine. But the more you practice, the further you can get. So what I invite women, and sometimes women are coming from the first time, they have never been to a women's circle, they have never experienced shamanic journey, and they're describing the most incredible journeys where all of them are meaningful. They're carrying so much, they're already expressing so much of their inner wisdom that all that it needed was just the space for them to stop. So what I end up doing is I allow them to connect, to find that common space, to see that it's very safe, and that all that facade that so many cultures have. How are you doing? I'm good. I'm good. You're good. Good. Yes, I'm good. Okay. This is not true. So while we're walking around thinking, I'm the only broken one, I'm the only one who don't feel that I fit in, or I'm experiencing something that I don't find the space to share, One thing that I love to share in those circles is when any kind of rite of passage that I'm going through, because those are so meaningful and necessary for us to experience, and we don't even know what we're going through because we never heard of rite of passage before. So I will come to the circle and I say, today I dropped my son off in school, or this week or this month I dropped my son off, and in that moment I realized I don't know who this Andrea is. I'm working through now discovering who this Andrea is. It's not drama, it's not a problem, it's actually a layer, a necessary layer that I needed to work through. And when I'm sitting there and I have 20 women around me and I'm sharing this, you know what? The shame drops. I don't feel embarrassed of feeling lost in my journey anymore, because it's not about being lost. It's about having the curiosity of discovering who is this new Andrea that is ready to be born. But a lot of us are walking around saying, I just change jobs, I just change careers, I just move out of my parents' house, or I just quit my marriage, and I just became a mother. All those massive life transitions, and we don't even know how to relate to them. What we do, what our culture has been teaching us to do, push it all the way down, suffocate them, make them look as little as impactful as possible, and keep with that straight face moving forward. So I bring women to say, there's no, you're not broken because you're working through those layers. Let's just push them all out, and then we can look at them from the outside and say, this is not even me. It's just one more layer that I'm working through. So there's a lot about creating the space for that is meant to come out and be revealed and be gently worked through. So this is a lot of the testimonials that I get from women. Things just change after I was here, and they may think that they didn't do anything because maybe they didn't necessarily cry, or they did cry and they didn't know why, or they didn't have that insightful, very Hollywood looking, like that insight that strikes you and now I know. No, but they open themselves for a new dimension of expressing, of connecting, that they never had a chance before. And from that moment, they start shifting everything just a little bit more in their lives, and things start aligning.
Yes, because from what you're saying, it's, you use this word reveal, a lot of, I guess, what holds us back, a lot of our limitations, once you reveal them, they loosen the grip. And so we are able to make more conscious decisions that are driven maybe by us being more intentional about a slightly different outcome. So a lot of the benefit, that you're describing is really becoming conscious of, what is happening, and distancing ourselves, from whatever narrative we have about ourselves. We are so complex. We are not just, that one person that needs to be perfect. And I think what you're helping, from what I'm hearing, and I have experienced, one of your ceremonies, which for me as well, it was very powerful. I had, a very transformative, in a way, experience during the shamanic journey. So thank you for that. And a lot of that, experience, you can't get there without being able to get to the subconscious. You just cannot get there. So that's why there is a limit with a talking therapy, which I absolutely support, but it's just one of the tools. And if you want to get really deeper, I believe, from my experience, shamanic work has been one of the most, efficient to get to the experiences that are really, really dug, you know, deep.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And even though I have always use my intellect to get out of things and to try to solve problems, I have never been so centered and empowered by not using the intellect and allowing that connection of body and mind and soul to be the one that drives the changes.
Yes, and actually the intellect is also important because, for instance, during my experience with you, you know, as I was in the underworld and I was experiencing, you know, I was going into this river that was pink and felt like a cloud, and it was just like, you know, I felt it everywhere. And I was able to understand what it was, what it meant for me, and what I needed to do, that I needed to let go and just give in, you know. And what I then experienced, I was able to allow this because my intellect understood what it was. And so once I think you've got a certain level of self-knowledge and you know where you know where your blockages are, when you have those opportunities in the underworld, whether it's in the lucid dream, you know, or whether it's on a shamanic journey, you can push through it much more quickly. That's at least been my experience.
I completely agree with you. It is this combination of how much awareness you bring to the 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 unhealed parts, the parts that need support, to the surrender of allowing that divine guidance to show you right here. And I love repeating in my ceremonies that we are there to heal things that we do not need to know how. We're there to set an intention. I say, if you don't know how to not do that, to not say, try to figure out the how, just think, how do you want to feel when it's all there, healed already on the other side? And allow spirit to guide you in this journey in ways and solutions that you never thought that could be possible. Because I never thought I would be here being a full-time healer in a space, women's circle holder. I thought my solution was to keep working as an engineer, but opening that space brought me so many different solutions.
So not being judgmental in some ways, basically, you know, whatever comes to you, right? Just that, because, you know, it's very easy to say to someone, when people ask me before ayahuasca or other, you know, plant medicine journeys, you know, one of the pieces of advice is give in, you know, like don't resist. But it's very hard, you know, to actually do this, you know, to when you are in the moment. But I think maybe almost like a better piece of advice is, well, don't judge. Don't try to label the experiences. Just be open to those experiences and be curious, because then you can receive at least some of it.
And I would complement that with the fact that as women, we were born already with a system that knows how to do that. So it's the course that I teach every few months, an online course that teaches women how to connect with this ebb and flow that we have inside of us, that if we were able to practice this, if we were instructed since we were young women to understand that there's this holding and release, it would be much easier to come to a ceremony and say, oh, okay, that's the part that it's the release. I know how to do that because I have been practicing for every single month in every menstrual cycle. So for me, it's all interconnected because the term wasn't coined by me. What's her name? It's Vicky Noble. She coined the term feminine shamanism. And it's about understanding that the woman's body is already a shamanic tool. We were already born with everything that we needed. But guess what? We have never been taught the information that we needed to get to that. So the shamanic, in a sense, is this deep interconnection with nature, because we already have the cycles. They're completely parallel to the moon cycles, to the earth cycles. It's all the ebb and flow that, if we don't know, if we live in oriented by this masculinized world, we're being robbed by potential that we have in living our lives.
Yes, very true. And do you, are there any risks for people associated with going through shamanic journeys?
Yes, you can know too much. I never, no. I'm going back to all the teachers and mentors, elders that I know, never, ever, ever heard. So there will be restrictions if we talk about plant medicine, extraction. So we're talking about energetic, negative energies, extractions, never a shamanic journey, because the shamanic journey is a place that you have a full control. And if in that moment you don't feel that that journey is in alignment with you, in that moment you open your eyes, you get up, and you're out of that. It's just, I don't meet people who come to the place. I meet a lot of people like me who had so much resistance and who spent so much time in the head that it was harder to fully experience and absorb all that opportunity offers. But no, there's absolutely no risk.
And I mean, as you said, it's more related to working with plant medicines, just because with higher doses of those, it's very hard to control sometimes what happens to you.
Yeah, but I say with great pride that I went to Temazcal sweat lodge when I was pregnant. And that's usually not well accepted by non-native people. So Westerners would find this very risky. But I was in full alignment with what was right for me. And I had an incredible transformative experience when I was in Temazcal, where I healed the things from my mother's lineage. I healed the things from being a fetus in my mother's womb in that one ceremony. So I would say the level of experience will change everything.
Yes, and a lot of the time, maybe a message to people as well is that you don't know where the healing is going to come from. You don't know which modality is going to come from. And so it's very important that we follow what we just feel the calling for. So if you're interested in shamanism, go and investigate, and you see where, there'll be crumbs from one thing to another. And I just, experienced many different modalities, and I saw how sometimes they also like fit together. In the morning there was, I once had a reading by a channel, and then in the evening I went and did holotropic breath work, and everything that I learned suddenly got processed, and I just thought, wow, this is incredible. And and totally unplanned. You just sort of follow what it is that that is valuable, and that you think is resonates. And I think when I discovered that you're doing a shamanic practice here in London, I just thought, oh, thank you, because ceremonies, it's such a luxury here, because we are so not used to them anymore. We're so detached from this container of a ceremony. And when I lived in Mexico for 6 months, I went to so many ceremonies, women's circles, various cacao ceremonies, temazcal, sound healing. We always, you always start with cardinal points, and you always, consider your ancestors and, and nature and all the elements. And suddenly, for me, it just felt like a bit like what you're describing, like home. This is all our home, and all those elements play such an important part. And those ceremonies you're describing, that the container that you're building, that you've got, it helps all of us to sort of ground, but also to really connect to everything that is healing.
Yes. Yeah. And for London-based people, I'm very excited to say that I just was offered a land in the middle of London, with nature all around for us to do ceremony here. So I'm very excited to very soon announce that.
I cannot wait. I'll be there. Could you tell us, Andrea, just maybe at the end to, tell people what kind of modalities you work with, just so they can understand a little bit more how you work and what you work with?
Sure. So I call myself a shamanic practitioner. I do use not just the traditional North American shamanic practices that I learned and I was initiated, but also this feminine lineage that was passed to me. And at the same time, the more the planet needs us to be healed, and the more I've been practicing this for almost 10 years, also my gifts have been changing. So I have a level of healing ancestral trauma that is very needed. I do womb healing, but I also I help people balance their chakras. So the energy that sometimes is so dispersed, or there's energetic blockage, I'm very good in doing that. For now, who knows? I always say that I borrow those gifts. They're giving to me. Hopefully, while I'm using them in the right way, they will stay with me. And also a lot of group work, because I see how important it is for us to be healing this in a collective level. So I host the moon ceremonies that are online. Anyone can attend them, and there are recordings. And I also host in London 2 or 3 regular women's circles in different places, and it's all on my website, Andrea. Yes. If you have any questions, or anyone wants to ask me a question, you can contact me at andrea@femininerevolution.com.
Wonderful. And obviously I'll add the link to your page so people can go directly and have a look at your work and try, if they're curious, if they resonate. But Andrea, thank you so much for your time, for sharing, all that you've learned, all that you've experienced. And like I mentioned before, I'm very happy to have met you and to have you here in London. So, we're very lucky that there are people like that here, and we can, go back into reconnecting with what our ancestors have been doing for years, and just sort of going back to rediscovering ourselves. So thank you for your work, and thank you for your presence.
Thank you very much. It has been a blessing meeting you, connecting, knowing more your journey, but also this talk here. Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy your evening.
Have a lovely weekend.